Welcome to Meeple Arts, a discussion of visual design for board games. I am Greg Grimsby, and let's get started with episode 4. All right, welcome everyone to this episode of Meeple Arts. I am excited today to have with us Triss. Triss, love an introduction from you. Go ahead.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for having me. I'm Triss. I've been a board game designer for about 3 years now, so quite a short time in the industry. Prior to that, I've got about 20 years experience in graphic design, illustration, and marketing. So I've made a move into this space, and it's been non-stop ever since.
So, why the jump into board games? Did you come in as a player and love board games and decide I can do that? Like what was that transition like for you?
Okay, so it's kind of a forced transition from the point of view that I was made redundant about 3.5 years ago. So at the time I was head of marketing for an education company, and after 5 years, redundancy came into play, and I was left wondering what to do. So I spent the first 6 months out in the wilderness doing everything that graphic designers do. So I was doing logos and corporate headers and everything else, some education-based work. And then one day, my daughter came home with a board game that she'd designed with my parents, and at the same time, I'd been developing a children's book, which conspires with Pebble Rock Delivery Service. I was doing a story about a puffin that was travels around these islands delivering stuff, and the artwork was lovely, but the story wasn't coming together. So it was in danger of being one of those projects that would be shifted onto a shelf and never seen again. So I just put 2 and 2 together. I thought, if my daughter could do such a nice board game, why don't I flip this around, grab the artwork that I've been doing for this children's book, and see if I can convert it to some sort of board game. And just because the story I've been designing was based on this little puffin doing deliveries around islands, it was just there. The game concept was there. Just turn it into a nice light delivery game for children. And it just went from there. So I put the initial concepts online. I joined a few groups on Facebook and said, hey, what do you think of this, guys? And it had a resounding response, to the point that it was picked up by a publisher on the first try. So it's just an amazing little few steps of fortuitous circumstances that came into play, and just slipped into line. So it's I stumbled into it by pure accident.
That's awesome. Well, we have some of your art queued up to look at for that game. How about we switch on over and we could talk about the art style and the process there. And so let's move on over to the board.
Okay, so I guess these are the initial concepts. I generally work in at that point I worked directly into pencil and paper, scan them in with a photo with the camera, and then took them into Freehand MX, which is about 25 years old now. It's about the oldest vector software you can get, but it's still to this day my number one go-to bit of software.
So no Illustrator?
No. I mean, I can use Illustrator. I'm competent with it, but my art style is raw vector shapes and lines. I don't bother with the filters and effects. I just like to draw with those vector shapes. And for that, freehand can't be beaten. It's just the best. Well, it's 34 megabytes in size rather than 4 gigabytes.
Simplicity.
Exactly. I've got a very simple needs and requirements from the software. and it suits my skill set perfectly.
Triss's
I like.
character is just adorable. I love this character.
Thank you. That was the initial lead character design, but I moved on from that, and we moved to Pebble, the puffin. So that's what ultimately ended up being the core character for the game, who runs the lighthouse and the deliveries and what have you. So yeah, I just take my sketches, whack them into freehand, and then start working on vector development. And the beauty of that is that it allows you to structure these characters almost in a puppet-like format. So once you have a series of assets that have been created nicely and you're happy with those, you've then got the opportunity to shift the arms, move the legs, change the angle of the head, and all of a sudden you've gone from one illustration to 50 or 60 variants.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's a quick and efficient way of doing illustration, and it's a way that I've now been stuck with for 20 years. I do everything in vector. Everything has a vector foundation. Sometimes goes into Photoshop after that, a bit of post-processing to add those filters and a bit of texture to the characters to give it more of a hand-drawn feel. But yeah, the foundation's definitely all vector work. That's the sort of secret to my art style, vector.
Yeah, I would imagine that working vector first makes you very shape aware, since that's kind of the strength of the program is shapes, right? As opposed, you go in Photoshop and you're going to be seduced by the painterly line, and then maybe you're no longer thinking about shapes. You're instead thinking about tone, and you're thinking about the actual quality of the line itself. But you get into vector art, it's shapes. That's it. It's shapes and strokes and outlines and all that. And I definitely see how that has impacted the legibility of your character's silhouette and the strength of its shapes.
Love I thought I agree, but in some respects, I try not to let that define me. It's very easy to let vector software define what you can and can't do, and I very much like to almost draw in vector shapes. So I'm not confined by it having to be this perfect ellipse tool, or it has to be this perfect bezel and movement. It can be, you can be really rough and organic with it as well.
Right on.
So it's important to not get too constricted, because I like my artwork to feel free and organic in its own right as well.
Definitely. Are there examples of some of the, I'm just going to call it like the paper doll, the puppeting in some of the other shots where we can see the puffin in different poses, or are they mostly just captured here?
Most of it's captured there, I think. Let me just zoom out and have a quick look. Yeah, I guess most of it is. I mean, if you can see the cards here.
Yeah.
So again, I mean, this is fundamentally the same character. There may be just a couple of head changes with regards to the original artwork, but the foundation of this would be one character, where occasionally you'd have to, I don't know, redraw the feet so they're looking face forward, but the rest of the character, I don't think that the body format would have changed anywhere in between different shots and stuff like that. So yeah, it does allow for that speed of use, and I think I'm getting a reputation these days as someone who's quite a fast turnaround designer. I like to get games and get them done and out the door in a couple of weeks, rather than these long-running projects that run for months and months and months. That's not to say that Pebble Rock, there's no way that was done in a couple of weeks. There's a good 5 or 6 months work put into that. But a lot of the projects I'm involved in now are generally a lot quicker and more organic, and it's due to that replication of assets and being careful with how you design stuff.
Now, I love that the board that you have there on the Pebble Rock game. how did the features and the kind of pop up landscape pieces? How did you decide that you were going to take that on? Because that has a component cost to doing that. Was it really your intention pretty early on to have a kind of more 3D board, or did that inspiration kind of show itself, I don't know, during the Kickstarter campaign, or what?
So I think with this, I went into the whole game concept rather naively. So I had no idea about costs on the game. I just wanted to create the game. So um, the islands came naturally and organically. I love the idea of having the standees because it just gave the game so much table presence.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I know a bit more about the industry and what have you, it's not a particularly expensive asset to do. I mean, these are cardboard cutouts on a plastic stand. So to allow for that level of aesthetic, it's relatively cheap. So prior to board games, my main foundation was educational design, educational resources. So it's looking at ways of creating something that is as visually impactful as possible and gets as much information across as clearly as possible. And they're two things that I think have served me well moving into board game design. So a lot of that was applied when looking at the card design and the board design, and the aesthetics of it was, you know, what are the objectives first, and what is the simplest way to define what those objectives are, and then lay the artwork over the top. So you almost do it from a UX perspective. It's very much the same as designing websites or anything else. What's the user experience, and what's the optimum way that the user can have a good experience, and then everything else comes on secondary to that. So that's the foundation of, I guess, how I construct something like the board.
That's awesome. You have a lot of cool stuff to look at, so I want to make sure we have a chance to do that. So do you want to navigate over to another one of your awesome projects?
Yeah, sure. So one that I particularly enjoyed designing was Tranquility, which was a lovely card game in this kind of spiritually similar to The Mind, where you have to guess numbers and put them into place and work out a grid together. And that was done by the use of these islands that were numbered. But there's a bit of play with this. So my brief from the guys at Board Game Hub, Peter and James, was to design pieces of land that would join together. So fortunately, they're the kind of guys that I like to work with, because they're open to a lot of suggestion, and they'll allow me to take a degree of lead with it, as long as it doesn't step too far away. So you know, the first change was, well, why not make these islands? Because the whole concept was it to be a peaceful, tranquil game, and the idea of them being islands was a you know, brings beautiful images into your head of relaxation and you know, being solitary.
Like escaping from all of life's other busyness.
Exactly. And then we realized that we either wanted to have a reflection, but then we thought, well, why not expand upon that and change it to a day or night cycle, so that you can play the cards either way, but it just has a different feel to it. And then we thought, why not include some sort of creature to every card and have them within the day or night cycle, so sleeping at nights, or the nocturnal awake at nights, and you know, vice versa. So there's that nice. It's more than just a card from a functional perspective. It's something that you can delve into and look for these little nuances on each card once you've got it. So to give you an idea of production, I guess it starts like anything else with a simple, very loose sketch, and then just move into the raw vector. So the second image there is me just removing all the color and just showing the line concept of creating it. So like I said, there are a few ellipses in there and what have you, but there's a lot of stuff that's just a bit rawer than usual vector work. Then the concept of it being colored, but just at a base vector level, so those flat blank colors that you'd introduce, and then whacking it into Photoshop and adding those textures and just adding a bit more color burn into it and a bit more shadow and what have you to finally make it really pop. But yeah, this was a hugely enjoyable and successful project. I think aesthetically, it worked really well. It's very nice, and that's led on to the latest project, which is Tranquility 2. So Tranquility 2 is very similar. The concept is to put these cards together in the closest number order to construct something. But rather than constructing just a large board like the first game, with this one you construct a mountain. So these cards here are actually going to be diamond shaped rather than squares, like you see here. So you ultimately lay them one on top of each other and ultimately create a mountain top where the final summit card sits at the very top to complete the game. But again, this has been quite interesting from it had to be different, but it had to feel like it was Tranquility at the same time. So it's been nice to enter into it again and have that advancement, have it as a version 2.0, and revisit it a couple of years later. So it's been a really fun project to get involved with again.
So Triss, if you could talk about maybe your approach and some of your defining visual goals for Tranquility 2. It looks like you have established a desire to keep your colors a little on the muted side. You're kind of avoiding pure primaries, and instead you're going for colors that are kind of mixed. And is that something that you establish kind of like a formal rule set for how you're going to use colors, or is this kind of more your response as an artist from one piece to the next, and maybe you're kind of subconsciously doing this? I'm just curious about the look, because the colors on this, although they're similar to Tranquility, the first Tranquility, these feel like they're a little tighter. So what are your thoughts on how you've been handling color on this project?
So there was initially the idea of color, but there's less of a foundation to the original game. It's a bit more abstract. So the original game, it's very apparent that you were laying down islands. So the colors that were defined within that was always based on sea and sky, and so it kind of defined itself more easily, I guess. With the new ones, they're much more abstract, and it's ultimately supposed to represent a large mountainscape when you lay down all the cards, but individually they're their own illustrations that make up a whole mountain. So there are colors that come into play with it, but at the same time we didn't have to be too tight with that, because the artwork also defines what those cards are, or at least I hope so. I'd like to think that the snow scenes and the grassland scenes and the more rocky mountain scenes, the illustration defines them as much as the color range that's in use. So although color was important, it was because we had that backup of the illustrational styles, it wasn't quite as important. So having said that, the colour washes have been put into place to be sympathetic towards the background. So we've included purple and colder blues for the mountain scenes, and that's partly in keeping with the board game box design. If I just move this up, I think it's here. Zoom out. Yeah, so the box design is based on having the Aurora Borealis behind it, and those beautiful colours. So we wanted those on the higher, colder kind of mountain colours. The green just coming into yellow and green washes just to complement the backgrounds that are in use. And again, the same with the rocky stuff. We just decided to use those reddish, brownish hues just to emphasize it more. So again, this goes back to that sort of UX thing, So yes, they are quite visually easy to differentiate between the groups, but that color just helps that little further. So if you're in the throes of the game and you're looking at a card in an instant, you automatically feel that it's part of a particular set.
Awesome. Now, you said something that was super intriguing to me, and that has to do with the box art. And I want to go back up and look at the box art because I'm a firm believer in the power of key art to establish a lot of the visual goals for a project. And it seems like in this case, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that image that was used on your box art, it sounds like this was developed pretty early, or at least not at the end of the project, and that you were able to derive some direction from that box art. Is that completely false, or how did the box art come into, like, when did it come in your development process?
So completely false.
Okay, correct me.
So the box art came in literally a couple of days ago. But
gotcha.
So what I do is I'll complete and sign off artwork at a vector-based level, and then so the cards were developed first, then the box art, then I went and revisited the card, and that's where color washes and textures were added into them to allow for a bit more conformity between the two. Ironically, the summit card that you can see at the top there has now been completely changed and has got a dark Aurora Borealis behind it to be completely in keeping with the box art. So this is a slightly older image I've gone and included in this. So there is they marry together in the final version anyway. It has been slightly the other way around. I think the key art was already there from the point of view that we had the original game of Tranquility, so I knew what the style reference was and how that was going to work. From that point of view, it was a game that we were able to kick into a lot quicker. There was none of that defining what it was going to look like. We already knew that was there.
I think it's great that even though the key art came in just a while ago, that there were some qualities that you liked in the key art that you then kind of pull back into the cards. And I think it's awesome that you were in the position to be able to do that, because I don't know how common you're able to, especially if you're publishing with someone else, that you're able to get that level of continuity between the box and the components themselves. And certainly it looks like you've been able to do that, and I think it pays off.
Yeah, and I'm probably my worst enemy at it when I work for other clients, because I'll do some art and I'll think it looks great, and then we'll move forward with that and work on the box art or something like that, and something magic, something spectacular will happen at the box art point, or something like that will completely change my perspective on the art that's been developed so far. And I'm the first person to dive in and go, perhaps we should revisit it, and perhaps we should change it and switch it up, where this little voice in my head should be saying, shut up, Triss, you've done it, and it's been signed off and it's all good, But so yeah, I'm quite impulsive on an artistic level. If something looks better, then the hours have just got to be put in to do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that attitude, and um, I think that's how artists should look at their work, right? I mean, things can inspire you, and you look at what you've done, and you go, yeah, I would like to kind of incorporate those ideas.
Yeah,
Would you be
absolutely.
able to talk about your journey to making your own company? Because that's a lot of work, and there's reasons why you would choose to do that, especially as an artist, maybe as a platform to do freelance work, but um, as an avenue for making your own games. I would love to see what you have here in terms of material, but talk about why you did that. What were some of the pitfalls of doing that? And hey, like, what are some of the wins about doing all that work to have your own company?
So it felt like just an organic progression. So I started off doing Pebble Rock delivery service um, almost on a whim to see if it could be done, and
Mm-hmm.
was very fortunate and realised it could be, and I got that signed, and that's now live and in the shops around the world, and it is
Awesome.
amazing. So off the back of that, I went and I thought, well, I've done one, I can do it again. So I started development on a game which is on here, um, called Squire's Quest. So there's
Oh,
a little bit of art
awesome.
development there. So that's based on the concept of that was the idea of it being just a solo dungeon delving game where you can play by yourself and lay down cards and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And again, to a degree, I hit the nail on the head, and I got that game signed as well. As soon as it was finished, it was picked up by Skybound Games. And again, that's in the docket, and hopefully sometime in the near future that will start going into full production.
Mm.
So I was very lucky. My first two games had been published, and at the same time, I was starting to get known in the industry, and people were coming to me, and publishers were coming to me asking me to develop games. And before I knew it, I was doing stuff for 25th Century Games and Floodgate Games, and multiple other companies.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd had two bites of the cherry. I knew what it was like to get your game published, and I knew what it was like to work for publishers and develop their games. But as much as I enjoyed doing that, it just seemed like the next progressive step was, well, why not try and do this myself? So about 2 years ago, I just put a call out and said, fully aware of my limitations, I basically said, I'm looking for a very small, lightweight 12 to 20 card game that someone's developed. And if you're interested in me publishing it, I'll take a look at it. And I was very fortunate with that. I probably had about 50 people in the space of 2 days firing
Wow.
games over at me. And the one that stuck, and the one that was the one that I ultimately took on was the Mariana Trench.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's been designed by Tom Layton, who's a brilliant game designer. He's constructed such a beautiful, elegant, lightweight game that you can fit in your pocket, and I can happily play all day long. It's got those little nuances in it where you can always slightly improve upon your last hand,
Mm.
So I thought, why not give it a try? But I was very mindful of my limitations. So I see a lot of people saying, I want to design a board game, and they go into it and they want the minis, they want the large board, they want
Mm.
400 cards, they want all the tokens and everything. So I thought, there's no way I can do that, but I can do a small box game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where I'll be going ever since moving forwards. So off the back of signing that, I set up the company, got it all registered and everything. Developed the game myself. So as with anybody that sets up the company, I'm the graphic designer, the marketer, the video producer, the T-boy, the accountant.
Yep.
So yeah, it's crazy. It's
so
7 day
much
week.
work, man.
Yeah, it's insane. I've not had a full weekend off since Christmas. I'm generally working 7 days a week, and late evenings, always keeping an eye on my phone for someone getting in touch with me, because I'm UK based and most of my clients are in the US. So I'm getting calls at 9-10 at night, or messages coming through saying, can we work on this? So yeah, it's really hard work. The upside, I guess, is that somewhere down the line I'll start receiving dividends for the games that are out there and published, and likewise for the games that have been successfully kickstarted, like the Trench. That will create a revenue stream moving forwards, albeit modest ones. But if I can develop over the next few years a dozen modest revenue streams, all of a sudden it becomes a big revenue stream. So from a purely money orientated perspective, there's that mindset of many small games, do them good, do them well, get them out, get them sold. But I'm an artist at the end of the day. I've never gone into this for the money, because I'll never have the mansion and the Ferrari. But yeah, if I can make a living enjoying what I love doing, then that's all the reward you need, really.
Definitely. Now, when you did the Kickstarter for the Trench, was that you and the designer kind of tag teaming, like posting for the backers and setting up the pages, or was that like all you, or did you have a third party who helped out with that? I would love any wisdom that you can share about how such a small team approaches Kickstarter.
So there were lots and lots and lots of people that helped me, but lots and lots of people that helped me just out of the goodness of their own heart through the communities and what have you. So I get people that give me proper reviews and give me run through the pages and check whether there are any typos, which inevitably there were. I'm horrifically dyslexic, so there's always people out there that want to give you that helping hand. It went on to Tabletop Simulator, and forgive me, I can't remember his name, but through his hard work, we ended up with it on Tabletop Simulator and everything else, which is just amazing. Thomas was fantastic from the point of view that he was always there in the background, and as I was saying, can you double check this? Can you make sure it's all right? I'm explaining this correctly, when you're marketing the rules, what have you, just to make sure it's all defined properly. But as far as the physical design of the Kickstarter page, the development, I took 2 weeks off and designed the video myself, all the animations and everything that goes into it, because I'm generally quite frugal with it, and I didn't want to spend $3,000 on someone else doing it when I could take a week and a half off and do it myself. But having said that, I was only going to accept my own work if I felt that it was on par with a professional video, for Kickstarter. So, same time, I'm aware of my limitations, but I'm also aware that I'm tenacious. So if you give me long enough, I'm aware of what looks right and what looks wrong, and I'll just keep at it until it does look right. And that's what happened with the video. So yeah, I designed the pages, I designed the marketing, I designed the video. I pushed it out there. Did the whole Kickstarter run over 28 days, monitoring all of the messages and responding and everything, and pretty much on my own. Yeah. So I
So
think I'll
much
probably get.
work.
Oh, it's insane. I'll probably get a team next time. Definitely.
So for
You just don't
another,
sleep.
yeah, definitely. For another artist who's considering a similar journey,
Mm-hmm.
do you have some suggestions for maybe some first steps? Like, would you suggest that they try to work on a partnership with the designer first, or should they just get started and give it a go? Maybe what are some resources that might help them out? You mentioned some Facebook groups or tabletop
Yeah.
simulator, but this is just so much work, and you've been there and you've done it and are doing it. But to the new artist who just loves your story and they want to maybe attempt something similar, no, this is maybe a hard question, but what things might you suggest that they research or reach out to or just start to do to kind of help them along that path?
Um, First thing I'd say is join the Facebook groups. Just look up all the board game groups on
Mm.
Facebook. There are 3 or 4 predominant ones out there. Board game group, board game spotlights. There's there's loads. There's loads of board game design communities as well,
Mm.
and all of them are brilliant. Um, you can throw your artwork on there, and that's what I'd recommend doing. Even if you don't know what your game is, you want to create a game, but you don't know what your game is, you haven't got a concept, you haven't got an idea, just scribble some ideas down and then stick it up and say, I've got this idea, the loosest of ideas. It's just, these characters here or this world.
Mm.
Throw it out there and you'll just get all the right responses. You'll get people coming up with ideas on how you can develop it and push it further,
Mm.
giving you constructive criticism about, whether in a very kind way tell you, this might not be ready for mass production and you need to work at it. But you need people to tell you that,
Yeah.
at the same time. So my advice is to don't hold back on any ideas or any concepts or anything. Get it out there from day one. Don't be worried about people stealing it, because by default, it's there on Facebook with your name on it. So anyone that comes along and steals it is going to be frowned upon by everybody else anyway. And it never happens.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But get it out there, build a following, get people interested in your game, because they're not only your prospective clients moving forwards. They're not only people that are going to buy your game because they've been invested in it, but they're going to be people that help you improve that game and improve what you're doing. So, I mean, I run a business and it's me, myself, running that business.
Mm.
But I've got 1,000 people on Facebook that will happily help me and give me the constructive criticism I need or the ideas to improve. So, I'm like the smallest business, but the biggest at the same time. So use that resource. That would be my advice.
That's awesome. I may have maybe one or two more questions, and then we'll kind of head towards the finish line here. This is a question that's kind of born out in my own work and process. You as a designer, as an artist, as a graphic designer, all those things, it can be tempting to spend a lot of time working on art. Maybe more often than you should. And like, oh, I'm going to improve this icon, but the design's still kind of in flux. How do you handle that process of improving the game itself, the design, and then doing a pass on the art? Are there certain intervals when you decide, okay, it's time to update the layout, or it's time to improve this from like the placeholder to the real art? Because I don't feel that this is a typical way of working, unless you're working at a publisher who has artists on staff and graphic designers on staff, and it's more collaborative. I think with the smaller teams, the designer kind of does 80 to 90% of the design work, and then they go, okay, let's get my graphic designer and get some illustrations commissioned. But you're in a position to, like, you are the vision of the
Yeah.
product, so you can choose how and when and to what level you're going to go ahead and improve the visual design. But that takes time, and it takes an investment. um, do you have some thoughts about how you've tended to decide when you were going to push the art? um, do you feel that there are benefits for pushing the art in terms of informing the design itself? I think it's a fascinating topic, so I'd love to hear your thoughts and experience on it.
So, from my own games perspective, if it's me designing a game, um, I'll have that written down in a loose format to begin with, but nothing more than that. So the essence of the game. So I'll be able to give myself probably nothing more than a synopsis of what the game is. So I won't even necessarily have the mechanics rounded down. You need to roll dice for this. So I'm bizarrely probably one of the worst people when it comes to designing games from my work ethic. I've got a very bizarre way of doing it, and that is that I rarely sketch out concepts. But this is on my own game, not for other clients. Of course, they get scamps and ideas and the whole conversation. But on my own game, it's in my head, and I go for end products. On the very first image I do will be a perfectly finished end card. It will. But what I also do by putting in that level of time and effort, and it doesn't always work. Sometimes I end up scrapping those perfect cards. But what it does allow me to do is to procrastinate while I'm putting that effort in. So I'm spending half of my time illustrating this beautiful card, but using half of my brain to think about how it's going to be implemented and how the game's going to be improved upon while I'm doing it. And invariably end up with the game graphics complete and the whole game concept and idea complete in my head, but maybe not even written down. I mean, the way I do it is completely the wrong way, completely. But I've just been very lucky with it. It's what I did with the first two games, and it worked for me. But I realised that it's probably not the best way for everybody to do it. I mean, the first two games were done on that foundation, and they were both signed. So, yeah, it worked for me. But again, they could be bigger, better games if I did start off with just nothing more than prototype pieces of paper with scribbles on them. I don't know.
So that would be Squire's Quest was an example of a game that was developed that way?
Yeah. I had little nuggets of ideas about how I wanted them to fight, how they, what kind of icons and powers the characters would have. I had snippets of ideas from games, from years ago where they were choose your own adventure type books where occasionally you'd get options where, if you decide to turn left, you need to flip this tile. If you want to go right, flip this one. So there's a little bit of narrative involved in it as well. It was all a mix and match that came together as the art developed. And the same very much with Pebble Rock.
Awesome.
So I've just thrown your rule book out the window. Let's try it.
It's fascinating to see how many different ways that you can approach the design problem, and it sounds like visual development and design development were kind of all just kind of churning together. Because that's what your skill set is, and that's what you're allowed to do because they were your games.
Yeah, but ironically, the two complemented each other because as you go through the design process, you're thinking about how the game works with the iconography you're choosing or with the card layout you're developing. So they both inform each other and end up with a cohesive picture. at the end or as you develop, as you get to a certain point. So yeah, I'm the kind of, at least with my own games, is chuck in all the ingredients and stir it around and see what comes out when you chuck it in the oven, a little bit. But I mean, having said that, I've learned a lot over the last 3 years. I've implemented my old skill set, which was working for other people, designing their websites or just designing their branding and what have you. And it's the same. Those same formulas are applied very much to board game design. You take into account what your client wants. Have they got any reference material that they've taken on board for the style and the feel of the whole game, and going through the scamps and your second levels, whether you're a bit tighter up to finished artwork. All of that comes into play with when I've got my professional work for someone else hats. But I do enjoy the freedom of, when it's my own game, having that chaos, because it doesn't matter. It's me at the end of the day. And worst case, I waste time doing something that's not quite right.
I did want to ask you, because I know that you have a lot of professional time that you were doing graphic design work, and you mentioned the educational side of things. In your experience, what makes effective communication of that visual design, whether it comes from an art director or it's you talking to your designer, or whatever kind of relationships that you have, what do you feel is just the some of the best and most effective ways to communicate visuals to someone that you're collaborating with, that has to either make some more visuals or you need to make those visuals?
So I had this conversation with a client the other day, who's brilliant at giving me a brief, and I always appreciate it because it allows me to, straight off the bat, just dive in and get it right almost first time every time. There's nothing worse as an artist when I don't know, someone asks you to do a picture of a scuba diver or something like that, and then you come up with a rough and they go, yeah, that's fine, and then you go into all the detail and you do the final one and they go, oh, but I wanted it to be a deep sea scuba diver with the really long fins, and I wanted it to be wearing a pink scuba suit, and oh, did I tell you that I wanted it to be a man and not a woman? And that makes me want to throw my computer through a window because I'm thinking, well, if that's your brief, why haven't I received that brief to begin with? So
right.
That forehand diligence to the nth degree makes me faster and efficient to anybody that I'm working with. So I'm never going to get the exact idea that you've got in your head as a finished product unless you give me all the details of what's inside your head. So just clear, concise information about what your objective is with an image or with a game. As many references to other artwork that's similar to what you want and what have you as possible. And this is common sense stuff, really, but rarely implemented. There are a lot of bad brief people out there that you spend your life going backwards and forwards with because they've not given you exactly what you need.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate you sharing your experience and perspective on that. Well, let's go ahead and talk about how our viewers can find out more about your work, Triss. Websites, social media links that you want to share. So if they want to look at your games or just chat about stuff, how can we get in contact with you?
Sure. So I have my website, which is brightlights.games. So probably needs updating a little bit at the moment, but there's a lot of my artwork on there, and there's ways of getting in touch. I've also got at Brightlight Games on Facebook and also on Twitter. So if you just run those through, it'll come up with my pages, which I keep up to date with my latest artwork and information. Yeah, I'll have my latest games on there, or if you've got a game that needs designing in the future, there's ways of getting in touch as well.
Okay. And is Ascent currently, is that already Kickstarted, or do you have any projects that you want to direct people towards, or have to wait and see what comes next?
So no, Ascent's in the pipeline. We're hopefully getting the prototypes finished this week. And that's through Board Game Hub. So that's exciting and coming up. But we've got the Mariana Trench is available on GameFound. That's just had a successful Kickstarter, and now it's up there. So that's going to be there for the next couple of weeks. So if anybody wants to get involved in the game and invest in a copy, just look up the Mariana Trench on GameFound, and it'll pop up.
That's awesome. Well, Triss, thank you for your time today. I appreciate the conversation. It was great to look at your awesome work and talk about the evolution of some of that. And I want to thank our audience for joining us today. So until the next episode, make awesome art. Thank you, Triss, for being our guest. If you have any feedback or questions, please email me at greg@meeplearts.com and visit the website meeplearts.com. Thanks for watching.